Um, Today we're talking about the part of the negative and the political from the book Negative Psychoanalysis for the Living Dead. And I just want to remind you, in case you forgot, that pain is constitutive for human relationship. It's not only within us, but it's in between us, not only constitutes us subjectively, but we were discussing also that it constitutes a social bond. Todd McGowan would call the constitutive lack the death drive repetition of a constitutive lack. So we can say that this lack is something that is constitutive. It's impossible to feel it because it's structural. It's necessary for sustaining bond, for sustaining sociality, and you cannot get rid of it. And it causes suffering, or it's traumatic. It feels as trauma. And as you remember, with those lines that I can explain everything. The lack is here, the lack is emptiness that at the same time connects and disconnects, and it hurts, and but we cannot get rid of it because it's structural. So the thing is, as Todd McGowan points out, that any political project, and maybe any project as such, or even human thinking as such, is positively oriented, meaning it's not able to recognize the lack as structural. It's not able, in other words, to recognize the death drive as not obstacle to overcome, but it's something central, something that is there to stay. It tries to ideology is aimed to avoid the lack, feel the lack. So ideology is not able to recognize it as structural. And we can talk about psychotherapy as ideology, especially now in therapeutic society. Something that doesn't recognize lack and aimed to feel the lack, to some kind of future where there is no suffering and there is no lack, betterment, or ideal state of where this traumatic lack doesn't exist. So it doesn't recognize it as structural. So Todd McGowan would formulate it the following way, that what ideology cannot acknowledge is the death drive. They don't fit with each other. The death drive, or the lack, repetition of lack as structural, and the ideology. Ideology is positively oriented, meaning it's aimed at improvement, and any improvement, or it has function of salvation here. Ideology is aimed to cover the lack. It pretends it exists by pretending that this is not necessary, that this traumatic lack is not structural, it can be avoided, and it suggested various ways how it can be avoided. And Todd McGowan talks about different types of ideology. He would mention Christianity, he would mention capitalism, for example, and he would distinguish conservative politics and emancipatory politics, or leftist agenda and conservative agenda. Even though they have different directions and they're quite different, I prefer this one. But essentially, they're all of those, even though they're opposite in some sense, with their directedness, conservative politics would be nostalgic, directed in the past, and emancipatory politics or leftist agenda would be directed towards future, after revolution or something, some revolutionary event. But the idea, both are based on inability to recognize the lack as structural, meaning they both have a function of salvation and the missionary function, this leading Messiah that's going to save someone, lead to a better future. Conservative politics would, both of them are unable to recognize lack as structural. They're based on inability to recognize lack as structural. They would externalize lack from the social bond, like pretending it's not necessary. It's not inside the subject and social bond, it's somewhere outside as an obstacle. For example, the conservative politics would say that it was better in the past, to which we have to come back, this nostalgic feeling, before the traumatic event happened, before we started to be sinful and corrupted. Somewhere in the past where we have to come back, there was no suffering, there was no lack. And emancipatory politics would externalize the lack, claiming that it's outside, there is some kind of obstacle that we need to overcome in order to establish the social bond that is complete without the lack and suffering as something internal to it. And McGovern would claim that there's idea of the stolen happiness. There is something, the obstacle to happiness that we need to overcome. Or the paranoia. We're looking for the source of what is wrong. Who are those people who are wrong? For example, a group of people that are the source of suffering or the obstacle which we need to fix. And then arrive to a happy future. They both actually directed towards the better future, towards the salvation in the future. So this goes first backwards and then it goes forwards, but it was too complicated to draw it. They both directed to the future, but the conservative politics, it's through coming back to the past, restoring the non-traumatic past. So both are unable to recognize the traumatic lack as constitutive to social bond and to subject. Both have a function of salvation, saving society or subject from suffering. And meaning there are theory, or like there is a direction given of what is there to be done to be saved. There is the missionary function. Someone is leading someone somewhere, which implies the manipulation. Anyway, so McGovern claimed that, and I agree with him, of course, that there is more potential in psychoanalysis to recognize the lack as constitutive, and to recognize death drive as structural, not to try to avoid it, to suggest some kind of program, negative program, psychoanalytic program that won't have a function of salvation, meaning would be resistant to ideology, to manipulation of ideology. And there were not many, but quite a lot attempts to combine psychoanalysis with political thinking in critical theory. And this is where the term negative psychoanalysis was coined by Russell Jacoby, who, for him, critical psychoanalysis that he mentions here is a synonym for negative psychoanalysis is a synonym for critical psychoanalysis. So we can see, and this is why I initially liked the idea of negative psychoanalysis as it was suggested for Russell Jacoby, because it emancipates. It looks like it embraces suffering, the lack, the negativity. It doesn't offer salvation, because he would call to it's like the opposite to positively oriented culture. That is capitalist culture, led by conformist psychologists, positively oriented, individualistic, and negative psychoanalysis, as opposed to it, as critical psychoanalysis, would, instead of chasing happiness, would rather embrace the depth of sounds of sadness and revolt. And it looks like it's not this embracing sadness. It looks like it's negatively oriented, but it's not really, because it's still Freud and Marxists, still critical theories. They would oppose themselves to conventional psychology that aimed at individual happiness, but they would claim that we have to embrace the sadness, but they still see the sadness as, and this is negative orientation psychoanalysis that is negatively charged, but they see it as the temporary measure, something that we need to do to restore our revolutionary spirit, meaning we need to emancipate ourselves from capitalist idea of individualization, becoming individually happy, which means ignoring injustice in society that causes suffering, and we need to use this negative charge in emotions. We need to use this sadness instead of hiding it to be more productive or something like that. We need to restore our revolutionary spirit through the feeling of sadness, and commit ourselves to revolutionary act. But still, it's not actually embracing. It's just temporary, and it's as means for future happiness of society or for future healthy society, the way Marcuse would and Jacobi would call it. It's still, they see it as the society got sick with capitalism at some point, meaning before it wasn't sick. And also it means that in the future it might not get sick. So this is a temporary measure. It's not actually negative. It's not negative, only temporary. And I was wondering, so here I'm writing something that Freud and Marx's criticism is just happiness is not now. We have to be happy, maybe in a different form, as social subjects, but in the future, it's still thinking of happiness as natural. We are born to be happy, but there is some sickness of society being unjust, unjust, and because of that we are unhappy. We need to embrace our sadness in order to get rid of it eventually. So it's not actually recognizing it, it's recognizing the sadness in order to get rid of sadness. It's still positive movements through negative movement, temporary one. It's still externalizing lack and not seeing death drive as central. And next time we will talk how is it, if it's actually possible to set the negative direction of political thinking, if political thinking or even a social practice can be negative. In McGovern terms, it's embracing the constitutive lack, or actually seeing death drive not as an obstacle to overcome, but recognizing it as something that is there to stay, as the central thing to the social bond and to the subject. Spoiler, it's impossible, but next time we'll go in depth, because even if you're embracing it, it's still doing something. You have to do something with it. It's still limiting it to your embrace. So it is problematic, but we'll discuss the depths of it's been problematic next time, when we'll talk about the negative project of psychoanalysis, if it's possible, unlike the Freud Marxist and critical theory projects that look like they're negative, but actually eventually positive. Right, so I'll stop recording it, and I ask you if you want to ask me questions.